And now all that's left to do is fire up the system and hope that I don't burn the office building that I'm in to the ground. It's been a while since I've had a look at just a cheap old PC on this channel, so I went to my local PC recycling shop and bought the cheapest system they had available, which was this little guy. Look at how cute and little it is! It is an Acer, which is not a great start, but it was pretty cheap. It cost the equivalent of about $75 US, and it's not that old. So we may be able to do some gaming on it. But before we start digging around its insides, it's time for a word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Be Quiet and their truly badass Dark Power 12 series of power supplies. Available in capacities from 750 watts all the way up to an eye-watering 1500 watts with an 80 plus titanium rated efficiency, you know it's made from the good stuff. My favorite thing about the Dark Power 12 series of power supplies, other than the inclusion of these beautiful knurled thumb screws for easy installation, is that they use a 12-pin to dual 8 pins for the VGA power cable, which means your graphics card is much less likely to overdraw that connector. Treat yourself to a truly baller power supply using the link in the description below. Thank you Be Quiet for sponsoring today's video. Now later in this video we are going to try game on it, which is not super promising considering that this looks less like a gaming PC and more like the kind of system used by the receptionist at a dentist's office in a mall, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. We may need to do some upgrades or whatever. Now having a closer look at the front I/O, it's actually very usable. We've got a DVD drive right in the front with 2 USB 3 and 2 USB 2 ports. Now around the back we have another warning sign in terms of potential gaming performance. We don't have a graphics card in here, but we do have a reasonable video out assortment. And then aside from the 2 PS2 ports and the UU port, we do have some usable rear I/O. Oh, that is a beautifully clean inside of an old system. FreeGeek clearly take pride in the PCs that they sell, because this pretty much could be new. And we've got dual channel RAM in here, which is easily the fastest way to my heart. This seems to be a staggering 4 gig kit. Nice. Other than that though, we can see that it's an older OEM system because the power connectors aren't proprietary, although the motherboard is definitely not a standard shape, although it makes sense considering the form factor of the system. Now this cooler seems reasonable considering that under there we have an i3-2130, which is a dual-core 4-thread CPU, and we do have to use the integrated graphics chip on there, which is the Intel Graphics 2000. Now I know these old Intel iGPUs are to gaming performance what polio is to the human body, but we do have some space for upgrades, which we'll try later in the video. Actually, let's quickly remove this very clean little cooler to have a closer look at the i3 that it's straddling. Ooh, that actually looks like it's the original thermal paste application. It's not super dry though, so it's still serviceable. We'll have a look at the temperatures later. This is after the testing, by the way. And then here we have our little i3-2130, which just looks like any Intel CPU. Other than that, I don't think there's much of a point digging any deeper into the system because under here we just have a 256 gig hard drive and not a whole lot more than that. So let's close up this very clean example of an old PC and yeah, try some gaming on it. Wow, sitting next to this PC really makes you feel like you're about to struggle to log onto the internet at your local library. Now I am quite optimistically starting with GTA 5. Clearly, 1080p was a mistake. That is not working very well at all. Okay, let's drop the resolution a bit. It's definitely better. It's almost double the frame rate. But it's still not going great. So we're gonna have to go even lower than that. I would say that this is probably not the best start when it comes to trying to game on this device. It seems like GTA 5 is just too much for it, so let's try something else. Yeah, now this is at 720p and it's not going super well, but we have these brief moments where we're getting reasonably above 25 frames per second. So maybe if we drop the resolution, it'll go a bit better. Oh, 720p is basically the lowest it'll go, but maybe those couple extra pixels will help. Now it just looks really cinematic for some reason. I mean, in all fairness, it is actually running a little bit better. We're kind of staying above 24 frames per second. Oh, no, it just dropped below 24. Now, the next game I wanted to try out is one of my favorite games of all time, BioShock. And it was launched back in 2009, so yeah, let's see how it works on this system. Let's see if there are cloud saves. No, there aren't. I don't know why I keep trying to play these games at 1080p. I feel like that's really stupid. Let's drop it down a bit. That's a bit better. We're getting closer to that 24 frame per second sweet spot we're looking for. I feel like there should be more fire considering that I'm swimming in crude oil. You know, I guess it's kind of running. This does very authentically feel like I'm trying to game on like a school computer lab PC. So I guess it does its job quite well. This is at 720p, so it doesn't look great, but you know, you can kind of see what's going on. I guess 1080p is overrated. Now, our next stop on our trip down memory lane is GTA San Andreas, another one of the all-time greats. And this, at 720p, is running. Is running very well. Look at that. We're getting above 60 frames per second. Oh, nice. That barely had an effect on the frame rate. Look, it's very playable, and it actually looks pretty good. It probably looks way better than how you played it back in the day. This was like Carpal Tunnel, the video game. It's not running that well, especially considering the fact that it's all on the lowest settings. This is 1080p, but we've turned all the settings down. Yeah, well, we're struggling to stay above 60 frames per second in this like open scene. Let's actually move to a more demanding bit in Half-Life 2. I guess it's not going much worse than before, but it's still not great. Let's crank the settings and see what happens. This Intel Graphics 2000 is really terrible, which I think brings us to a good point for an upgrade, right? Because surely we can get more performance out of the system, especially considering that the CPU utilization is pretty low. So there is some headroom left in this in this little Acer system. Now, I think the first upgrade we should make here is drop a graphics card in here, and there's no better option than the now legendary GT 1030, which funnily enough may actually be overkill for this system, but we can make some changes later in the video as well. This is just a starting point. Ah, my age-old nemesis, the breaky-offy PCI cover. Hey. Only did minor damage there, and oh, I broke off the wrong one! Whoa, that is a tight fit. This is some S-tier GPU choking action we've got going on here. I'm so sorry, little guy. Whoa, that's not quite what I was expecting. They are two peas in a pod at this point. I have never seen a CPU that was this closely matched to a GT 1030. That's actually kind of cute, I'm not gonna lie. And the gaming performance is significantly better. We went from not being able to run the game at all at 800 by 600, whereas now at 720p, we're getting about 60 frames per second. The only real problem now is that the GT 1030 in the current market costs about as much as a down payment on a small suburban house. It's not really a financially reasonable pairing for the system anymore. But look at that! Look at how cute and similarly terrible they are! It's so adorable. But with that, I think it's time to take our upgrading to a very reasonable next level. Now that is what I call a good abomination. Now adding the EKAIO to this whole situation was quite frankly a stroke of genius, because I knew I was gonna have to rest the RTX 3060 on its back above the CPU. And if I stuck with the air cooler that originally came with this system, the fan choking was gonna reach demonetization levels of nasty. Whereas with the AIO, all of the CPU's heat is being carried safely away from the back of the graphics card to the front of the system over here. And then finally, I needed to add some supplemental power for this RTX 3060 because this sad little power supply wasn't going to be able to handle it. So I threw in this Be Quiet Pure Power 11 FM to feed our hungry little graphics card. And now all that's left to do is fire up the system and hope that I don't burn the office building that I'm in to the ground. Now step number one in powering up this pod racer is by firing up the supplemental power supply that's been permanently tripped on. So yeah, there we go. So that's on, and then all that's left to do is fire up the normal PC. Nice, there we go. All the fans are spinning, which is good, and we have a video out. It's not doing great still, in all honesty. The graphics card is basically not doing anything. In fact, its fans haven't started spinning yet, and it's still sitting at 34 degrees Celsius, which means it's really not working very hard. But we have quite high settings at 1080p and we're averaging about 60 frames per second, so this is significantly better than before. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit disappointed by those performance figures. Let's try something a bit more demanding and see what happens. Now when it comes to Battlefield 5 running at 1080p high settings, the graphics card's doing a bit more, you know, at least in terms of power draw and core frequency. Not really utilization, but you know, there's only so much that the little 2600K can do to keep up with a modern graphics card, especially if you can't overclock it. It's only running at 3.5 gigahertz. Let's see if I can help this guy up without dying. No. That death is Battlefield in a nutshell. It's like, wait, it's clear, right? Nope, you're gonna get killed by an airplane. So, what have we learned today? Well, the GT 1030 has found an unlikely soulmate in the i3 2130, and don't plug a new graphics card into an old PC even if you have a sick 70s build montage souping it up. And finally, if you liked the video, please do subscribe to the channel because having a bigger number next to my channel name really helps with my low self-esteem. Anyway, with that, thank you for watching, and until the next video, bye-bye.